Chapter 12. Location: Los Angeles, California. Date: June 19th. Jarren, Calavan. Jarren parked in front of Treadon's house, flipping off his radio with an angry twist. He'd refused to listen to 80s music the whole way home, but that meant he couldn't use his extensive playlist on his phone. He tried the radio, but nothing sounded familiar. He'd missed 3 decades of music because of his obsession with trying to learn about the things his mom loved. Too bad he wasn't one of those things. Even after she'd met him, Selena was more concerned about getting answers than getting to know him. Jarren rubbed his eyes with his palms. He wasn't any closer to figuring out what was wrong with him, and he had learned very little from Selena, except that he didn't want to be anything like her. She said choosing a guardian would help him, and that choice wasn't hard for him. Of all the people in the world, there was one person he trusted, one person he never wanted to imagine a world without. Rachel Sampaio. "Hey, stranger." Jarren looked up to see Rachel approaching from across the street. She had 2 pizzas in her hands. Her hair was a little longer, and she'd bought a new sweater that hugged her in all the right places. Her smile was the most familiar view on the planet. He climbed out of the car and wrapped her up in his arms. He leaned into her neck, taking in her smell, a mix of coconut and the earth after a rainstorm. She was his anchor when he was being rocked in an endless storm. "I got your messages," Rachel said. "Strangely cryptic and short-winded, but I'm glad you were thinking of me." Jarren pulled back. "I was thinking of you the whole time. Do you know what it took to send you messages? I had to get rocks to rearrange at your feet from 500 miles away. With my mind." He wiggled his fingers next to his head with both hands to emphasize his words. "Impressive. Does the planet Earth have spell check?" She raised one eyebrow. "Did I spell something wrong?" "Only my name." "Did I?" Rachel laughed and tugged him in for a full kiss. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against his. Jarren leaned them back against the car and reveled in her nearness. "You didn't spell anything wrong. It's just an interesting concept to imagine all that dirt filtering your messages, like an aquifer. I don't think the ground has anything like a grammar check." Jarren took the pizzas from her and set them on the hood of his car. He pulled her against him and let the warmth of her mouth spread through his body. She kissed him back. Wrapping her arms around him, she pulled back too soon. She glanced up and down the street like she was checking to make sure they were alone. "How did it go? Do you want to talk about it?" Jarren knew he would need to tell Rachel about his mom sometime, but he couldn't bring himself to explain the weirdness, the coldness, the rejection he'd felt from her. "I learned a few things, but it wasn't what I expected. I do want to ask you something, though." The question had felt so natural in his mind. Would you be my guardian? Rachel being his guardian was so second nature to him that he hadn't even considered how to ask her, but now that she was standing in front of him, the significance of what he was about to ask hit him full force. Selena's voice came back to him. "The man I asked to be my guardian said no." His father had had a chance to be a guardian and ended up possessed by a demon who tried to sacrifice Ellie and pull daggers from her bones. That was a long way to fall. "No rush." Jarren waved his question away and pointed to Rachel. "What about you? Anything exciting happen while I was gone?" He wasn't going to be like his dad or his mom. He would make this special. He'd plan a way to ask her before popping the question. It wasn't exactly like getting married, but it was more intense commitment than a wedding vow. Rachel got serious. "I'm glad you're back. I guess, to sum up, Gabe's gone, Abigail's freaking out, a descendant of angels showed up and told us Gabe is a murderer. Treadon and Ellie are like oil and water. Caden Bachman is back, and I haven't been able to open any other files on your dad's computer." "Wow." Jarren blinked away the swirl of words in his mind. "You have an unrivaled ability to summarize. Have I ever told you that?" "You flatter me." Rachel smiled, but he noticed the tightness behind it for the first time. "So, no bad news." She shook her head and shoved his shoulder. "You can never take anything seriously, can you?" Jarren wasn't sure how to respond. He rubbed the spot on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" He didn't know what else to ask. Didn't know how else to say he cared. "I'm sorry I left." "Did you have a choice?" Rachel asked. "You never would have been satisfied until you found her." "I found her." He said the words and realized that he wanted to talk about it with Rachel. He wanted her to know everything. But before he could say another word, Rachel held up her hand. 2 men walked toward them, but Jarren hadn't seen where they'd come from. They were the same height. One man had dark hair, a slim face, and dark skin. The other had stylish white hair, not like an old man, but more of a sun-bleached surfer look. They mirrored each other's movements, stepping to the same rhythm, their arms swinging like matching pendulums. the same and opposite at the same time. "This is the descendant and his guardian I was telling you about," Rachel said, loud enough for the two approaching men to hear. "Darius and a bee? Meet Jarren, my boyfriend." Rachel's sentence had a firm period at the end. Jarren's heart stuttered at Rachel's confidence in defining their relationship, but her words also conveyed a wall, like he was nothing more than her boyfriend, almost like she didn't want these two men to know anything more. The man with the surfer-style hair put out his hand for Jarren to shake. "It's good to meet you, Jarren. I'm Darius." Jarren took his hand. Darius returned a firm, business-like handshake, looking directly into his eyes and stepping in close enough to close a hand over his shoulder. The motion reminded him of his dad, when he was planning on passing over the business to him, training him up. There were a few years where there was nothing more Jarren wanted to do than work next to his father, Xander Calavan, business tycoon. A lump formed in Jarren's throat, but he refused to drop his eyes. Something in the way Darius looked at him reminded him of Xander and washed away his reservations. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Jarren's instincts took over. He knew a business approach when he saw one. Two men wanting to make a deal. Darius gave Jarren's hand a final squeeze and stepped back. "This is my guardian, Abhijit Harakumar." Jarren shook hands with the man with the dark hair. "You can call me Abhi. It is an honor." "An honor?" That was a good way to start out a business relationship. A little flattery went a long way. The two men were familiar with the game. "This is Rachel," Jarren said, expecting her to offer her hand as well. She kept her hands in her pocket. "We've met. I know the news we brought this morning wasn't well received," Darius said, bending at the waist toward her, almost like a small bow. "Yeah, Gabe's a bit of a hero around here. Saved a lot of people's lives." She shifted closer to Jarren, and he felt the pressure of her arm against him. It was so nice to be close to her again, but she was stiff and cold to the two men in front of them. The pieces clicked into place. "These are the guys who told you Gabe killed Treadon's dad." Rachel nodded. Darius and Abhi both bobbed their heads once in confirmation. "My ability is to see truth. I do not make false accusations, and I am bound by my oath to see Gabe receive justice. I am sorry." "Are you?" Jarren said. "You don't sound very sorry." "There are many ways to be sorry." Darius didn't even pause. Jarren huffed a humorless laugh. "There are many ways to define truth." "Wise words." Darius smiled. "You're a man after my own heart." "What do you guys want?" Rachel asked. "We said we would let you know as soon as we heard from Gabe. We thought we'd extend Jarren's invitation personally." Darius showed no sign that Rachel's coolness bothered him. "What invitation?" Jarren asked. "You, Ellie, and Treadon have been invited to join them at the Vale of Descendants," Rachel said. Abhi spoke. His voice was softer but held no less confidence. "There is more than one reason for our visit. We understand Gabe was gathering Unguarded." "Gathering is a strange term to use," Rachel said. "You make it sound like he was forming an army or something." "You sound like a comic book character," Jarren said. "You kind of look like one too. Can't you see it?" He turned to Rachel and put his thumbs out and fingers together so that his fingers made a rectangle frame around Darius and Abhi. "Two guys in suits talking about the apocalypse?" "Kilomoto, issue 6, Rachel said. Jarren's stomach fluttered with happiness at her comic book knowledge. Then he remembered he didn't like all things 80s anymore. "I saw the exact frame. You guys have an uncanny likeness." "Humor," Darius said with a tone as flat as a cat under a steamroller. "This will serve you well in the coming days, but I also see more truth surrounding both of you, like a cloud." "I don't see it." Jarren sensed the offer was about to be put on the table. These men had approached them for something. "Can you tell us where the other Unguarded are? We are afraid Gabe has abandoned them, too." "Why would he take the time to save so many if he intended to abandon them at the end?" Rachel asked. "That's an answer I don't have," Darius said, opening his hands and spreading his arms like he was waiting to accept a gift. Abhi touched Darius's shoulder. "The enemy is closing in." "What are you talking about?" For a moment, Jarren thought the man was overreacting, but then he heard a sound he'd only heard once before. The night his father died. The sound of grinding stones and haunting wind, growling creatures not meant for this world. He looked around and realized somehow the dog-like creatures had surrounded them, creating a full circle like they had risen straight up out of the ground. There were rows of them, thick enough so that the ground wasn't visible, deep enough that they covered the entire street and Treadon's front lawn. Looking over the creatures' heads, Jarren could see there were some approaching Treadon's front door. "There are so many of them," Rachel said. "All of the weapons are inside." Abi pulled a weapon from his jacket pocket. It was a razor-thin blade with a handle on both ends, like he could use the thing as a saw, or a whip. "You can't take them on alone, my friend," Darius said. "There are too many." Jarren leaned over and pulled off his shoes. "I don't think your stinky feet are going to scare them away," Rachel said. She stood protectively between Jarren and the Fenris. "Oh, ye of little faith," Jarren called to the earth beneath his feet, and pulled up the ground. A barrier rose up from the concrete sidewalk and a yard behind them. "Impressive," Darius said. Jarren tried to ignore the warmth he felt from the praise. He wasn't sure, even now, if his father would have been proud or afraid of him. If Xander had been invited to be a guardian, that meant that he knew about Descendants. He knew that Jarren was an Unguarded. Did that explain his aversion to touching him as a child? The reason Xander cleaned his hands after a handshake? Like his condition was catching? This won't hold them off for long. Others in the area are in danger. Abi moved closer to Darius, holding his metal whip in both hands. "We need a pulse," Darius said. "You mean from bonding?" Jarren asked. "You are a descendant of Samuel." Darius pointed at him. "If we bond you to a guardian, the pulse will scatter the Fenris and give us a reprieve to get back to the Vale." He bowed his head toward Rachel. Jarren felt the twist of fear, of rejection, even as one of the Fenris heads appeared over the top of his barrier. He shook his head. "We're about to get our asses handed to us by sick-looking dogs. I don't think this is the right time." "The bonding between a guardian and a descendant is a powerful moment," Darius said. "It creates an immeasurable amount of energy. Are the two of you unwilling to be bonded?" The noises of the Fenris scratching and clawing their way up the steep mound of rocks and concrete filled the air, echoing around the small circle of protection they stood in. "That's a little personal," Jarren said. Rachel moved to stand beside him. "Is that even possible? You need a witness and a bonder. If the two of you are willing, so are we." "You can bond us right now?" Rachel asked. Jarren felt like he was experiencing whiplash. "What? I haven't even asked you." One of the Fenris got its body balanced on the edge of the barrier. "I hate to put this pressure on you, but it may be now or never." Rachel turned to Jarren, her eyes wide. "You don't want me to be your guardian?" "Of course I do," he said, more sure about those words than any he'd ever spoken. "I wanted to make it special, you know? Ask when you weren't expecting it." "Wait, does that mean you would? Would you be my guardian if I asked?" "Are you asking?" "It's a big commitment. It's like tying yourself to someone by your DNA for the rest of your life. We've always been the best at three-legged races." "That's true. We totally swept elementary school fair day. Every time." "I think it was a sign." Rachel's arms wrapped around him, and Jarren's heartbeat increased 1,000 times. His vision blurred, and his throat got tight. He blinked. Someone coughed. Abi flicked the whip, and the metal curved up into the air, wrapping around the Fenris as it was about to jump. The whip severed the neck. The head of the Fenris fell at their feet, rolling around until it disintegrated. Darius pointed to the other side, and Abi sent the whip cutting through 3 more Fenris as they reached the top. "This may not be how you imagined it," Darius said, "but we will be your witness and sealer, if you are both sure." "Here? Now?" Jarren's voice was an octave above what he wanted. "It doesn't have to happen somewhere special?" "No, a bonding can be done anywhere," Darius said. "What do you want?" Jarren asked, turning to Rachel. "I want you," Rachel said. "And won't it be fun to tell the other Descendants we eloped?" She smiled. "And it would be nice to survive to fight another day. By your side, of course." "We are so cheesy." Jarren wanted to envelop her in a hug and let the ground wrap them up. He wished he could pull her into the earth with him, but he couldn't, not with the block on his mind. He turned. "We're ready. Tell us what to do." Darius put a hand on Jarren's shoulder. Abi rested his hand on Rachel's. They gripped hands, and Darius directed Rachel and Jarren to grab hands as well. This was real. She was going to be bonded to him. He couldn't find the space between his excitement to breathe. "Is it too fast?" "Since when have you liked the slow lane?" she asked. A second passed, and then another. Jarren waited for a flash of light or an explosion or something. Nothing. Jarren blinked. Rachel pursed her lips. "Do you feel anything?" Jarren asked. "Nope." Abi and Darius weren't moving, their eyes closed, but a line of confusion was forming on Darius's forehead. "Did it work? Is it done?" Jarren asked. "I was expecting something a little more impressive." "Something's wrong," Darius said. Jarren's heart sunk to the ground. Selena had said the same thing. Something was wrong with him. He couldn't travel through the earth. He couldn't bond with Rachel. He couldn't even save his dad when it was prophesied in a Descendant vision. He was broken.